Africa only created 3% of cumulative emissions when it comes to emissions, but Africa suffers disproportionately from the negative consequences of that. Today, Africa loses anything between $7 and $15 billion a year because of climate change, and that's going to rise to another $50 billion per year by 2040 if the current situation goes on. But the continent received only 3% in terms of climate finance. So what are we doing at the African Development Bank? At the African Development Bank, we've committed to provide Africa with $25 billion in climate finance by 2025, and we're well on our way to doing that. The second thing is to realize that 9 out of the 10 most vulnerable countries to climate change in Africa are the low-income countries. There are 37 of them. So we just raised $489 million to provide grants, largely grants, and some concessional financing for these highly vulnerable countries to tackle the impact of climate change. Third is that we also have launched and we are implementing the largest ever effort in the world on climate adaptation. That is called the African Adaptation Acceleration Program, which is mobilizing $25 billion for climate finance for adaptation in Africa. You know, we're devoting 45% of all of our financing as a bank group to climate finance. Well, first and foremost, I think many countries, because of the challenges of COVID, of climate, and also because of the monetary policy tightening in Europe and in the United States, they face rise in interest rate, and therefore debt service payments have gone up. So these countries need a lot more concessional financing, more than ever, and they also need to have access to capital markets. So let me take the case of Egypt that you mentioned. We just provided $375 million of partial credit guarantee to support Egypt to launch its Panda bond in the China capital markets for $500 million. That allowed them to launch a bond in a market they're not used to, for long-term bond at also a lower coupon rate.